So if you clicked on this video, you probably already know who Junji Ito is, but I'll give you a brief description, which is that he is a dentist turned horror manga artist, and that's the best you're getting. But over the last several years, Viz Media has been putting out all of his stuff in English, which is awesome. They started off with some of his bigger works like Uzumaki, but they've been pumping out his short story collections, which I love, actually. I love a lot of his longer works, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that a lot of Junji Ito's best work actually is in the form of the short story. So Tombs is a collection that came out earlier this year. Like I said, the year is 2023, by the way, in case you're watching this from the future. In which case you are, comment what year it is down below. And I don't know the exact number of short story collections that they've put out, but it has to be like 7 or 8 at this point. And so as I've gone through each one of these collections as they've come out, I can't help but feel like we've already kind of seen the best of his work already. And so I kind of feel like we've reached the point of diminishing returns with Junji Ito's work, but at the same time, a lot of it is still really enjoyable and a lot of fun. And I would absolutely recommend this collection, Tombs, if you're interested. Now, if you've never read anything by Junji Ito, I would not recommend this story collection as your first book by him. Not because it's bad or anything, but just because there are better things out there by him. Like Uzumaki's fantastic, Ramina is one of my favorites. The short story collection Shiver, that one's phenomenal. Fragments of Horror is another story collection that I love. So I don't think Tombs has any of Junji Ito's best work, but at the same time there are still actually some really phenomenal pieces here. So I wanted to share some thoughts on the collection as a whole, and then we'll jump into the individual short stories. Timestamps for each story are in the description below. As I've already kind of said, I think this collection is solid, but it's not Junji Ito's best work. Honestly, I wasn't enjoying the collection too much at first, but then by the time you hit the back half, I feel like things really kind of ramp up and the stories just kind of increase in quality. There's this idea I've heard a lot about short stories and creative writing and just in general, that what you should do is you should write the end to your story, and then you should chop off the last paragraph or two. A lot of people feel like that makes their stories better. Some people feel like their stories just drag on for too long, and so by removing that last paragraph or two, then you kind of have a tighter, more concise, and better piece. And while that may be true of some stories, I don't think it's true of the stories in this collection. In fact, I think that probably a good half of these stories should have been longer than they actually are. There are multiple stories in here that really kind of, ramp up and up and up, and it's like, oh, what's going to happen? And then they end, right? They end before anything can really happen. So a lot of these stories just kind of end with me going, oh, that was weird. And so because of that, a lot of these stories just don't leave much of a mark or an impact on me. I do think that there's a lot of value, especially in horror, in leaving certain things unsaid. And I think that in horror, it's very important to leave certain questions unanswered. Sometimes the mystery is more meaningful and interesting than the actual resolution. But with some of these stories, it really does feel like the short story was not enough to contain them. And it feels like they should have been expanded into maybe 2 short stories or just an overall longer work, because it feels like in some of these stories, there are a lot of ideas to wrestle with, and the 40 or so pages that most of these stories are just is not enough to do them justice. Okay, so I guess I'll start talking about the individual stories. So Tombs, which is the title of the collection, is also the name of the very first story. So Tombs is kind of a fun story. It's about a guy and his sister going to visit a friend, but they're driving to this one specific weird little town, and the guy driving just hits a girl, and he just straight up kills her. And of course the 2 characters are like, well, what do? We just killed someone. So they just throw her in the back of the trunk and then drive on. And it's just what you do. As these 2 characters get to the town, what they learn is that if someone dies, then you have to leave their body alone, because their body will transform into a grave marker. And if you move their body, that's disturbing their body, and so they will not transform or, evolve into the grave marker properly, and that will cause them, unrest. It'll cause problems, basically. And so then the guy and his sister are visiting with their friend, the girl who they went to go see, and then the girl's like, hey, where's my sister? Turns out that the girl they killed at the very beginning of the story was the friend's sister. And also they're not supposed to have moved her because, now her body is disturbed and, will not transform into a grave marker properly. And so anyways, the 2 leads are like, yeah, we gotta leave town because no reason in particular. Hope you find your sister though. And so then they go and they find out about this big well where you just throw corpses, apparently. And so then they go to move the sister, but she's already started transforming into a creature, basically. And the brother who hit her gets a scratch from her, and then he throws her into the well, and then he suffers hallucinations for the rest of his life and transforms into a horrible grave monster as well. And it feels like a story where it's like justice has been served. It's kind of a neat story. I like the weirdness of it. I like the weirdness of, yeah, you have to leave the body alone so that way it can transform into a grave marker properly. I don't know. I like it. I thought it was a good story. Next, we have Clubhouse, which is about 3 girls who are friends and a haunted house. And I feel like that's a pretty good setup to any story, honestly. So anyways, in this haunted house, there's an upstairs and there's a downstairs. So 2 of the friends go into the house. One of them goes onto the bottom floor and the other goes to the top floor. And then the 3rd girl waits outside. So then the 2 girls come out who went into the house, but they've come out changed and they're not friends. Basically, the story is kind of goofy because it just turns out that the top floor and the bottom floor are both haunted by a political student organization that splintered off into 2 groups. And so one group was the bottom floor and the other group was the top floor. And then anyways, they like all killed each other. And so that's why the house is haunted, is because it's haunted by the ghosts of political college students, I guess. Which honestly, that's not that scary. And so whenever the 2 girls went into the haunted house, each one was indoctrinated to the group that belonged to the floor that they went to. So the girl who went to the top floor is now part of the top floor's ghost clan, and then the girl who went to the bottom floor is now part of the bottom floor's ghost clan. It's kind of goofy. And so basically the idea is that each girl is trying to get the 3rd girl, the girl who did not go into the haunted house, they're trying to get her to join like one of the political organizations made up of ghosts. The girl is kind of tricked into going to the haunted house because she doesn't realize that she's entering the haunted house because she's entering it from a weird side. And so she goes to the top floor and then she realizes, oh no, there are a bunch of ghosts. And so then she starts running down the stairs. But then at the bottom of the stairs, there's this big wooden wall, basically, that was built by the students when they were still living to divide the 2 halves of the house. And so anyways, this 3rd girl, who's not part of any of the ghost clans, freaking falls down the stairs and her head busts through the wooden panel. And then she's stuck and she can't get out, basically. And the ghosts of each floor start pulling on her because they want her to join their clique. The bottom floor ghosts want her, the top floor ghosts want her, and she just wants to be set free. And so the story ends with the girl being pulled on by each group of ghosts. And so the story cuts off right then and there with her being pulled. And you can kind of see where it was going, which was just that the 2 groups of ghosts were going to rip her in half or something. But at the same time, part of me is like, yeah, that was kind of a lame ending to just show her like floating, I guess. So this is one of those stories that I think could have gone on for a little bit longer, not much longer, but I think I would have liked to see a more complete resolution to the story. Next up, we have Slug Girl, which I think is the single most underwhelming story in this collection because it's about a girl whose tongue turns into a slug. And they can't really figure out what to do with it. Her parents can't figure out how to fix it, so they like try cutting it off and it doesn't go away. And so what they do is they just stick her into a bathtub full of salt. Her entire body shrinks, except for the tongue, which is the only part of her that's a slug. The slug crawls away and then they just see it on a tree in the backyard, and the girl's head is essentially acting like the body of a snail. And so it's kind of misleading to call the story Slug Girl when it should be Snail Girl. And so this story is like kind of frustrating because it's 20 pages and there just isn't really a point to it. There's no reason that I can really see why the girl, started having her tongue transform into a snail. I need to do a video on this, but I think that a lot of the time whenever you have horror, people just think, oh yeah, it's just supposed to be scary, it's supposed to be meaningless, it's supposed to be, oh no, something bad's happening, But I think that whenever it comes to something like this, whenever it comes to someone being punished, because that is what this feels like, is it feels like punishment. It doesn't feel like the girl did anything wrong, and so it feels like in order to receive this kind of punishment, there needs to be justification for it. And it's like bad things happen randomly to random people every single day, but at the same time, I think it would make for a more satisfying story if the girl had done something to deserve to be turned into a snail. I'm thinking of classic horror examples like Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein, he creates the monster, and then he is kind of tormented by the monster as a punishment for creating the monster. James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2, he commits a terrible sin and is tortured. Slug Girl didn't really do anything wrong, she just kind of turned into a snail, and I don't really know why. So it just feels like a half-baked sort of story to me. It's a cool idea, but it doesn't feel like there's much of a purpose to it. And so I think that's why it doesn't really work that strongly for me. I will say though, I did see a cool t-shirt with Snail Girl on it, so that's something, cool merch. Then we have The Window Next Door, which was one I actually quite liked. So basically a kid and his family move into this new house. They are told by the neighbors, oh yeah, there's like a weird lady who lives into the house next door to you. And so the kid is trying to sleep at night and he keeps on hearing these weird calls from this weird lady, and she looks like this. And so she's really ugly looking and scary looking. And it kind of reminds me of, I think it's called Fashion Model. It has the same kind of gross, weird, creepy vibe. And so I like this panel because it's cool. She starts being a creep and calling to the boy, and she's like, hey, let me come over. And so that's creepy in itself. And so the boy calls his family up to sleep with him in his bedroom that next night, and they do, and nothing weird happens. And so they're like, whatever, kid, you just had a bad dream. And so then the next night the lady tries to come over again, and the boy doesn't like it, and it's gross and weird and whatever. One morning the boy wakes up and the woman's house has grown closer to him, basically. Like, it looks like the house has kind of, part of it's turned fleshy and gross and organic and weird, like a Dead Space kind of environment or something. And then that's where the story ends. And it's like, I feel like you could do more with that concept. I feel like you could have pushed the idea for another, 20 pages or something to come up with a more satisfying resolution, because I think it would have been more satisfying if the lady had actually come closer into his house. I think it would have been a more satisfying conclusion if the houses were starting to meld together or something like that. But I really think that this story just needed a little bit something more, because I think it's good as is, but I think it could have been something greater. And again, I really like the story. It was one of the better ones, I think. So I just wish it had gone on a little bit longer. Next up, you have Washed Ashore. The premise is this. A horrible deep-sea monster has washed ashore. There is a man there investigating it. He meets a woman. The woman tells the man, "Ah, yes, I lost my fiancé in a tragic deep-sea expedition, and he never came back from it." And she's like, I wonder if he's still alive down there. And so then some scientists or people or whatever decide to cut open the monster because it's unlike anything they've seen before. And then there are just a bunch of people who've transformed into fish people. And then the woman recognizes one of the fish people as being her fiance. And then the fish people start invading, I guess. And that's where the story cuts off. And it's like, I really wish that there was more to this. I think it's a pretty decent first chapter to a larger work, aside from the fact that it's very convenient that the woman's fiance just happened to be in the giant monster that washed ashore. I think it would have been more satisfying if she had to go and find another giant monster that had him in it or something like that. Like I said, I think it's a great first chapter for a larger work, but just as a story on its own, it just feels lacking, plain and simple. There should have been more to it. And again, it's not a bad read, but it's just, Junji Ito's done better stuff. Then you have The Strange Tale of the Tunnel, which, all things considered, is one of the less strange tales in the story collection. Essentially, a man returns to his hometown where there's a weird tunnel, and then he flashes back to when he was a boy. You see, whenever the man was a boy, the tunnel had a train coming in it, and then the boy's mother walked into the tunnel, and then she was presumed to have killed herself. But I don't think they ever find her body, so it's kind of like a weird mystery. And then one day, the boy's younger sister is found wandering off into the tunnel, and so he has to go get her, and then he discovers this science lab that is just in the tunnel because they shut it down after people were killing themselves in the tunnel. So there are no more trains going into it. And so you just set up a science lab sometimes. That's just the way it works. So anyways, they're doing research on, I think, cosmic rays in the science lab. And they took this picture the first day that they were there. And on the picture, you can see all these ghosts shooting through people. And so some time passes and the boy is called back to the lab. And basically, because of the spirits or the ghosts shooting through people or whatever, people start falling into the ground and being pulled down. And it's actually quite cool. I really dig this. And I think the boy loses all of his family, but he is able to narrowly escape until he comes back as an adult. And the story ends where it began, which is with the boy as an adult entering the tunnel. And honestly, I think that this is a story that is fine the way it is. I think you could have pushed it a little bit longer, and you could have had a really cool third act with the boy as now a man venturing into the tunnel. I think you could have done something really cool with it, but I think it's good as is. I think that one thing that seems to be consistent in what I think about these stories is that a lot of them have more potential than is actually realized. I think these stories could be greater than what they actually are, is what I'm trying to say. And so I think a lot of these stories are perfectly good, but I don't think a lot of them are great until we hit Bronze Statue, which is my favorite story in this collection. Bronze Statue is a lot of fun because it's about this really ugly old hag, which is how she's described in the story. Basically, this woman has commissioned a statue to be made of her in her likeness when she was younger, and she had a statue made of her husband as well. And these statues sit out in the park. And oh, by the way, her husband was the mayor, who she murdered and threw into a swamp like 3 years ago. And so anyways, there are these 4 women who are at the park with their kids, and the statues are there. And the women are kind of making fun of the statue, and they're like, yeah, I've heard that this lady who the statue is supposed to be based off of is actually this really old, ugly hag. And so they're mocking her and, whatever else. And it turns out that there is a microphone in the statue. And so the lady is overhearing all of this. And so then the lady sends out invitations to the 4 women who are making fun of her, inviting them over to a big fancy dinner. And then the lady poisons all 4 women and kills them. And it shouldn't have been surprising to anyone. But the women did not want to tell their husbands where they were going because they were like, oh, gasp, what if there are young men there? Or, some crap like that. It's like kind of stupid. I guess there's no such thing as communication in relationships in these stories, but here we are. Anyways, so all 4 women die, and the lady with the statue has the statue maker come and turn these 4 women into a statue. And the statue maker is like, oh, this statue is so freaking good, guys. I love it. And then the lady realizes that, oh yeah, murder is not something that people like. And so she gets researched by the cops. Or researched is not the right word. Researched is not accurate. It's not like she's a 3rd grade book report or something. She is being investigated by the cops. That's the word. So she's being investigated by the cops, and they have this like statue of the 4 women tied up and bound and gagged and whatever, and freaking out and trying to get free. And the lady is like, just destroy this freaking statue. Destroy it. It's like clearly evidence against me. And so then the statue maker's like, oh dang, this sucks. So he destroys it, and then the kids of the 4 ladies who were murdered are at the park the next day. And so they ask the bronze statue, hey, what happened to our mothers? Actually, before any of this happened, the bronze statue was speaking to the children, which is how the mothers started talking about the bronze statue, because the kids were like, Mom, the bronze statue is speaking. And they were like, oh, you silly children. So anyways, the kids ask the bronze statue, they're like, hey, where are our moms? And the bronze statue, which is being controlled by a lady, it has not only a microphone, but also some kind of amplifier or whatever to project her voice. She tells the children that, oh, your mothers are on a vacation. They're having a lot of fun. It's a great time. And then the statue of the mayor, her husband that she killed, speaks to the kids and goes, no, this is bullcrap. The woman that you're speaking to in the form of a bronze statue is a liar. So the mayor's snitching on his wife who murdered him. And the lady's like, what? How did this statue of my husband speak? My husband has been dead in the river for like 3 years. And so she goes into the swamp where she threw her husband's body, and then she gives it to the sculptor who made the other statues, and he's like, oh, I will make the most beautiful statue. She has the sculptor turn him into a statue, and so the sculptor makes a very like young, handsome version of the man before he was an old fat mare. And then the very vain woman has the sculptor make another statue of her. It's essentially the same thing as the bronze statue that exists out in the park. So anyways, the 2 statues like fall in love and stuff, and are kind of like, oh, you stupid old lady, how did you think that like, this beautiful, handsome young man that, looked like the mayor when he was young, why would you ever think that he was in love with you, you dumb hag? And they're just like trashing her basically and like mocking her, and they're like, you stupid ugly lady. Like, it's like kind of mean, but also she's like a murderer. She's like murdered 5 people. I don't know at which point you become a serial killer, but like, I think that probably crosses the line. I feel like if you've killed that many people, you're like officially like a serial killer or something. It's like there's no way to come back from that. 1 dead person, you can like sleep it off. 2 dead people, that's like, you might feel bad for a day or 2. 3 dead people, might feel bad for a week. 4 bad people, that's like pretty bad. That's like pretty bad, not gonna lie, but like you're still okay. 5 dead people though? I don't know if you can get into heaven. What is the highest number of people you can kill and still get into heaven? I'm asking for a friend. So anyways, the woman decides that she wants to be turned into a statue, and so she goes and dies in the same swamp where she threw her husband. And so she pays the sculptor to retrieve her after 3 years and then turn her into a beautiful statue, so that way she can be alive as a beautiful statue forever. So anyways, after 3 years, the sculptor goes and he actually retrieves the woman's body from the lake, and he fashions her into a beautiful statue. And the sculptor is like kind of sick because he's been breathing in bronze for the past 500 years. And then he pours the metal in there, and then it cools, and then she's just trapped in stone forever, essentially. She's not a beautiful statue. She's just trapped in this massive rock, and her spirit is in the sculpture, and it's just a hellish existence. And that's how the story ends. Like, this is one of those stories where it's like, it's good, but you just can't think about it too much, because like you can't think about the families that were destroyed from losing, their mothers, those kids who like lost their moms forever. And, you can't really think too much about it. You just have to be like, yep, the villain, she's She's trapped in stone forever. That's it. It's one of those stories where none of the wrongs of the villain are righted, but at the same time they get their just desserts, so whatever. Okay, so the penultimate story in the collection is Floaters, which is actually a really cool concept, basically. There is this couple, and then there's a third wheel. The third wheel is having this problem where these floaters are popping out of him, and they look like sea urchins. Essentially, they're like these little spike balls, and these little spike balls tell everyone his innermost thoughts and his deepest, darkest secrets. And so then there's a fourth guy who acts like the villain, who looks like the bad guy from the Lorax movie. That's just what he looks like, I guess. Some people have only a face that a mother can love. So anyways, the third wheel opens his window, and then all the spike balls containing his thoughts shoot off into the ether. And then some people will start collecting them, and the guy from the Lorax wants the base collection. And anyways, the third wheel, he's kind of hinted at being in love with the girl in the couple, because of course he is. And so anyways, he kills himself. And then everyone starts shooting off all these floaters, all these little spike balls, telling everyone their deepest, darkest thoughts. The guy from the Lorax starts like obsessing over them weirdly and trying to collect all the floaters. And he collects them all in his bedroom, and he just has like an obscene amount by the end. And then his mom, because they're in high school, his mom like is annoyed with the floaters because they're just constantly saying deep, dark secrets all day long. And his mom's like, I opened the window and let them all go because they were like really loud and annoying. And then the Lorax man kills his mom, which is a very normal reaction to have, I guess, to realizing that your mom let all of your floating spike balls fly out the window. I don't know. See, I've never been in that situation before because I keep locks on my windows, so I don't have to worry about my anger hate balls escaping. That sounds awful. My anger hate balls. Okay. So anyways, the guy kills his mom, and then that guy starts having his own anger hate balls flying off him, and everyone starts hearing his thoughts about how he killed his mom. And then anyways, the floaters just kind of disappear, but then sometimes trees will pop up with the floaters on them. So that's why like everyone knows that the Lorax man killed his mom. And I'm sorry to call him the Lorax man. I don't remember what his name is. His like tree tells everyone that he killed his mom and whatever else. And then the couple, right? There's the couple. There's the guy and the girl, because the third wheel was in love with the girl. Anyways, it's the guy and the couple who he learned from his girlfriend that, you know, she was like, yeah, I don't really like you that much, because she had a floating spike ball that like said that, where she was like, yeah, I just kind of date this guy because he's like easy to date, but I'm not really all that interested in him. He like is totally like unfazed by this. He doesn't give a crap, so I don't know if he just doesn't care about the relationship either, but regardless, he takes the girl over to a tree that has the third wheel's spike balls on it, and the third wheel spike balls are like finally him admitting that yes, he was in love with the girl from the couple. And this is really one of those stories that I think should have been expanded into something more, because I think you could do something really cool with it. I think that there's a lot of psychological stuff that you could play around with here, and I think it was played around with a little bit, but at the same time I just think it could have been expanded into something more. But yeah, I definitely think this story was one of the better ones in the collection. I think it was definitely solid. Then finally we end with the bloody story of Shirosuna. There's a weird, creepy town. There is a good-hearted doctor who wants to move to the town. The entire town is sick and ill, and they look like they have diseases. Everyone in the town has AB type blood. The man who's the doctor has O type blood. But anyway, the doctor wants to start checking out the people of the town. So he does, and he does all these checkups. And he's like, everyone has freaking problems. Everyone has weird blood problems. And then the mayor of the town is just like, yeah, there's a lot of like, you know, people don't really leave the town. And so it's a lot of cousins, marrying brothers and sisters and parents. It's not good. And yeah, their family tree is just a straight line. There's this girl who has a younger sister, and the girl is in love with the doctor, and she's like, I will have that doctor. And the doctor wants to check up on the little sister, but the younger sister doesn't want to be checked up by the doctor. And so the girl who's in love with the doctor goes in to get checked up by the doctor. And anyways, the doctor runs some tests, and you know, he helps the girl, and then after a while she looks normal and she looks beautiful. And she's like, actually, I like the way I look whenever I'm ugly. She's like, I like the way I look more when I'm a horrible skeleton monster. So anyways, it's revealed that there's blood roots under the ground, and the roots within the ground essentially act as giant arteries, draining all the people's blood. And so that's why everyone looks like a ghoul from Fallout or whatever. So then no one wants to acknowledge that there's a weird blood tree. And so then the doctor's like, look, I'll show you, this is blood in the ground. And the mayor is like, nope, it's water line or it's a gas pipe. And the doctor's like, you said those didn't exist here. And the mayor's like, And so then the doctor splits the tree root open, and then all this blood sprays out. And then in order to heal itself, drains the blood from the people. Like it just kind of spills out into the ground, and then the ground absorbs it. And so it starts absorbing it from the doctor. And then the end of the story is just, hey, the doctor has become one of the townspeople, and he's become ugly, and also he's with the ugly girl who wanted to marry him, and so everyone's ugly together. Or maybe ugly's kind of mean. Everyone's sick together, I guess. Sorry, I got used to saying ugly because it's like so many of these stories revolve around people being ugly. It's kind of messed up, actually. It's like, honey, how was that horror short story collection? And it's like, oh, it was the scariest thing I've ever read. It was just ugly people everywhere. But also, now that I think about it, I feel like there are a lot of stories that Junji Ito has written where it's just like, oh yeah, they were ugly. It's like that fashion model one. It's like the horror to it is that like she's a monster and she like has spiked teeth and like eats people or whatever. But the real horror to it is that she's ugly. And it's like, wow, this is really deep, Junji Ito. Thank you for sharing and instilling a fear of ugly people into me. Like, I'm realizing this and I'm just like, man, this is kind of whack. But anyways, the bloody story of Shirosuna is pretty good. It's a good note to end the collection on, and really, I think this collection on the whole is solid. Definitely, I have issues with it. I don't think it's as high quality as some of the other stories. I think that it's a weird instance where it doesn't have some of the high highs that a lot of his other story collections have, but at the same time it doesn't have some of the low lows that a lot of his other story collections also have. And so it's just kind of middle of the road, but all in all, it's still solid. Like, it's still very much an enjoyable, fun read. And so, of course, if you're interested in Junji Ito's work, absolutely check it out. Again, I would recommend like probably at least half of what I've read by him before recommending this one, but like, it's still good. So there you have it. So thank you for watching, and I'm going to bed now. Have a nice night.